Welcome to Bottom Line with Bob and Kendel Ehrlich, episode number 10. And you can follow us at Earl Bottomline, at Bob_Ehrlich, and at Kendel Ehrlich.
And they said it wouldn't last.
That's right. 10.
10.
How could that be?
So we attended our son's high school football game. We've attended all four, but I wrote a piece in Western Journal that you haven't seen yet. It just was published.
No, but I did attend the game.
You did attend the game.
So I was there.
And you shared my observations. But you have not seen this piece as yet because it was just published and I didn't show you, in fact. And I made the observations that we've made on this show previously, that parents maybe were the most relieved individuals in the stadium, including the players. Although it's April, it's warmer, it's baseball season, it was still football, it was still the season, it was still two rivals, it was still intense. Now, the 4,000 people that are usually there were not allowed in, just the parents, very small crowd. So the buzz was missing, but certainly the sense of competition was not. Correct?
That's right. It was good.
So the second part of my piece was devoted to the extras that made our Friday Night Lights experience, besides being delayed 17 months, so exceptional to us, so fun to us. And I'll just read you, my dear, from the piece. No one interrupted the game with a woke message from a corporate progressive league with ties to the regime in Beijing. No one told me to adjust my mask while I sat outside, socially distanced from the other parents. No one attempted to educate me as to what is and what is not the most appropriate way to cast a secure ballot at the polls in the state of Georgia. No one sought to teach me that the flag we honored during the Star-Spangled Banner represented a nativist, racist, or evil country. For that matter, no player took a knee during the anthem. At game's end, in fact, the players simply signaled their respect for one another, no in-person handshakes in the COVID era, and went to huddle up with their respective coaches. There's a piece I wrote, not a piece, earlier in this column. I also talked about how the kids were playing for the love of the game, and so we watched white players and black players and fast players and slow players and large players and small players and wealthy players and poor players and players from two-parent households and players from no-parent households block for one another, tackle for one another, root for one another, play for one another. And that's the magic of the game. That's why people love sports. That's why our Friday night was so special, because in sport, particularly at the high school level, it's just love of game, love of teammate, no lines.
And families have an opportunity to go there and get away from all of what's being on television right now, the news. They want to get away. And it is the most pure way to do that right now in high school sports.
They wanted to get away from COVID. They wanted to get away from racial strife, the George Floyd trial. They wanted to get away from January 6th, all the things that have contributed to this abnormal time in our culture, because people crave normalcy. They deserve normalcy, and at least we had some for 2 hours Friday a week ago.
And the kids need to continue to get back into normalcy. There need to be real plans for the fall. It was so obvious how much the kids loved it. It's only 4 games in the season, way too short, sort of just got going when they stopped. And I think that we need to have a real plan going forward for the fall. It has to be normal. The kids deserve it.
And as we've discussed, there are other kids in Maryland and other states who had no games, 0 games. And those kids are really behind the 8 ball, and a lot of them are missing out on opportunities for college, for scholarships, for financial aid, to be seen on tape, not just football, all sports, not just boys and girls, everyone. It's just a catastrophe for a lot of kids.
Well, I'll say too, the administrators that were there were so excited to be there and really want to work hard. It's my observation that they want to work hard. And again, the school board hierarchy is making decisions that some of them and probably most of them don't agree with. They want to get back in the classroom. They want to start teaching. They want some normalcy and they want some latitude about how to do that.
But for these coaches, they got to coach, which is what they want to do.
Right.
So, again, a fun Friday night. All right, on to issues. The southern border. We've talked about just about every show so far. We have to. It's the number one story in the country, in the world, in fact. Getting worse. The numbers are disturbing. I've seen lots of speculation as to why the Biden administration, immediately after the election, decided to do what it did, which is basically send a message to the world, come on up. And the most rational, reasonable explanation I've seen to date is it was what Donald Trump did not do. So it wasn't real intellectual. It was very political, following on the campaign. Trump's bad. We're going to undo what Trump did. So we're going to undo what Trump's administration did at the border. So if he did X, we did Y. And Y has resulted in a lot of human misery at that southern border.
Terrible human misery. I mean, it's never been worse at the border. And just to do something because Trump did it one way without thinking about it, I think the problem is now everybody's seeing exactly how bad this is. And even the Biden administration midweek had to start admitting that they had a crisis on their hands. They have more than a crisis. They have fentanyl seizures.
Can I stop you there for a second?
Yes.
233%, I had this noted for you, 233% increase in fentanyl seizures. Now, you've told me in the past that southern border was not priority one in the past, but it appears maybe that's changed.
Well, what my point was that so many of the workers on the border were not able to put their attention toward the drugs coming over the border because of the humanity coming over the border. And so for a period of time, those seizures were down. Good to see that the seizures are up, but it could be an indication of that just how much is coming over that border is probably a huge amount. And as we all know, the amount of overdoses are way up from 2019, which is really our last year of full statistics. So it is a huge battle that continues to, and human trafficking also on that border. We've seen, and heard from direct reporting, sexual assaults on the way up as children are coming up. And then, of course, as they're housed, basically like animals, there's lots of trafficking issues, lots of sexual assault issues also. It's just terrible.
Getting back to the fentanyl for a second, which is so deadly. You've told me privately, publicly, it's no secret that the country of origin typically is China. Correct?
China.
Yeah, China. Mm-hmm. Now, interesting aspect to this debate is, or not the debate, the story, I should say, the narrative, is the media, because the media was very slow to report on this story. What a shocker. The Biden Protection Inc. media has been in business. They did a very fine job during the campaign. They won the election. But this story got too big. There's too many whistleblowers, too many victims, too many elected officials up in arms on both sides of the aisle, by the way. If you're a county executive, you're a small-town mayor, a small-time sheriff, a member of the city council in a subdivision bordering on that southern border, you got a big problem.
Or if you're a Democrat in Congress and represent one of those areas.
Yes, yeah, that's true. So the silence has been broken. It is now a major story, and I can prove it, in fact. New Pew poll now rates immigration and the problem at the border on par with COVID in the minds of the American public. How about that? With COVID.
Well, it should be. It really should be with what's happening.
No doubt about it.
And they need to stop allowing people to come up. They need to renegotiate with Mexico. They need to do what Donald Trump did, by the way.
If there's one thing I would wish the Biden administration to do, it would be to reinstitute the stay in Mexico policy, which was working, which was processed, by the way, which gave people due process. It just restored order to what is now a very disorderly situation at the border. All right, dear, a little light, getting into a little deeper, but a little light at the beginning. Award shows and pro sports. Oscars are next week. I thought of you. You like to watch the red carpet and all that stuff and how the women were dressed in the dresses. You would watch that stuff.
I did.
Are you
for
going to
many
watch?
years. No. I actually haven't watched in years now. Don't care. Don't want to see any of it. Don't want to hear any of the opinions. Don't think the country needs to be confused by entertainment and politics right now.
Well, we're going to get into this in a second here. Now, the ratings have been down, as you know, for Golden Globes, for the Oscars.
Well, ratings for everything are down a little bit. Sports are down.
Well, the NFL, NBA clearly took a huge hit. MLB is down a bit. Now, the NFL last season did come back. People love their football. It did come back, but I think still took a hit with its reputation. So we've seen hits in the ratings
with their entry into politics.
With their full entry into politics,
right.
Which brings up my point. And we were talking about this prior to the show, and I want everyone to hear what we have to say. We are acclimated, accustomed to all pro sports, particularly NFL, and they do it very well, to run ads concerning safe, quote-unquote, issues, non-controversial issues, just off the top of my head. Support for veterans, support for kids, support for medical research, support for mental health, support for youth sports. These are non-controversial issues. People care about them. They're safe. They're not PC. They're not anything with regard to politics. They're simply, in many cases, the players giving back. The best of pro sports is when fortunate young men and women who are talent being given by God, decide to give back in monetary ways or in their time, their reputation, whatever it happens to be, but they give back. And that's a great story. People love it. No problem. It's a turnoff when a line is crossed. When a league or a team or a coach or a player, for instance, opines on the Georgia voting process, the new voting bill. Now, that's a controversial issue. Some people think A, some people think B, some people think C, whatever it is. But that's a line that the fans have generally drawn, particularly during the season. I do want to make this point. You disagree with me a little bit, I think. My problem is during the season, during the game, we're going to get into Brett Favre's comment in a second, people want to watch the game. They want to live the game. They want to escape the reality, as we talked about with high school football.
Right.
They want to live their reality. Another time, they want to escape, and pro sports, college sports, high school sports, youth sports helps to accomplish that. There's no doubt about it. Athletes have their First Amendment rights, however. So the analogy I make is when you go to the grocery store, the store clerk, the person who fills the shelves, that person has a First Amendment right, but not to give you his or her views when you're buying your oranges or grapefruits, right?
Not while at work.
Not while at work. Exactly. Same point with regard to professional athletes. I have no problem. The First Amendment is not suspended when it comes to Coach Popovich giving his views or Steve Kerr or any of them, as much as I might disagree with them. But during the game, during the season, during the timeout, during the commercial, I got a problem. They're at work, and I'm watching not to get their opinion. I'm watching to watch the ball go in the hoop or the running back get in the end zone or the fastball in the outside corner. I'm not watching for a political message, and I think that's the line that people have generally drawn. Your thoughts?
I think that people are getting resentful of them talking about politics at all. I think that Colin Kaepernick would argue that his platform was that he was a famous football player and he could use that platform any way he saw fit. And I disagree with that. I don't think that. And I think that that's where, I think you're arguing both sides of the coin here because you're saying people want to watch their sports and escape. And by doing that, they don't want to hear the stars of the particular sport and these athletes espouse political views to have an impact through their platform.
Which is what Brett Favre said this week.
Right. And I agree with Brett Favre. I think people are tired of it. And I think the numbers are going to show that. And I think the sports that don't get involved in that, for example, college athletics, college football. People are going to stick to that and start veering away from stardom and stars using their athletic platform to get a point across. And I just think that people really want to make that clear. Difference. Yes, they have a First Amendment right. Then get involved on your own time, in your own way, and don't use it through the public airways and through the NFL and through the organization that you've become famous with because you happen to have a really great talent. People don't want that anymore. They don't want to hear from their entertainers. You know, the Oscars and the Golden Globes and all those shows, they've been going way down in viewership for years now.
Yes.
Because people really just don't want to hear from privileged people that their point of view is more important than middle America, that they snub their nose at and say are clinging to their Bibles and their guns. So I think that resentment is strong. I think it's valid. And I just think that we ought to draw those lines. Now it's worse than ever because of corporate America, sponsorships, cancel culture.
It's a bit of a different issue now.
This state won't do it a little bit, but it's evolved into this, and it's serious, and it's detrimental to capitalism, and it needs to stop. And people are going to push back.
Well, some of that pushback, that's a little bit of a different issue. I respect, I hear what you're saying. I agree with you 90%. But again, and we can't have it both ways. We can't have a Tom Brady, generally supportive of Trump and like him.
No, I'm not saying that.
I know you're not, but sometimes people get into that. My point is, when you're playing the game, do your deal. In the all season, like you said, if you want to give back or come,
well, go do that on your own time.
Get associated with, yes, that's my point. In the all season,
but I don't want to hear about it in relation to the sport and to watching the sport and to using the platform of the organization of your sport in order to do that. I don't want the NFL getting involved in supporting players that do X, Y, or Z to the detriment of other players and what they believe.
Well, we've crossed
that barrier. They need to stay out of that.
Well, not this NFL, not these woke leagues.
But let me tell you something. People, the pushback is real.
Pushback is real, no doubt. We will continue that discussion in the future. Speaking of a controversial issue, the Floyd trial. Miss Public Defender, prosecutor, or drug court prosecutor, person who's lived her entire life in the criminal justice system.
I have not followed this. I've followed clips of it. I have not followed it or watched
minute to minute, right?
Minute to minute coverage of this. A couple of interesting legal aspects: third-degree murder, which I had not been familiar with.
Let's talk about, first of all, second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter are at issue, or not guilty. Basically, the four options here. And for second-degree manslaughter, you have to have a predicate felony. In this case, it would be the assault. So the death that followed the assault would qualify for second-degree murder. That's why they charge second-degree murder. I'm sorry. Your thoughts?
No, I was just going to say that I think the jury is going to have a tough time with the difference between second-degree manslaughter and this third-degree murder, which reads as follows. The unlawful killing of a human being when perpetrated without any design to effect death by a person engaged in the perpetration of or in attempt to perpetrate any felony other than enumerated categories of felonies. So what you're saying is that second-degree manslaughter requires a felony, and this also seems to require a felony. So I think that there'll be some interesting questions from the jury on deciphering those two. I think that, I guess, the underlying felony would be an assault.
Yes, correct.
From the officer, as opposed to doing that by way of procedure or duty. So that'll be an interesting line to draw, and
the central
issue is use of force.
Correct.
during the arrest.
Did the officer act lawfully as a police officer? And you can't, and the jurors are being instructed on this, you can't use 20/20 hindsight, Monday morning quarterback here. It has to be what was reasonable under the circumstances at the
that time.
Correct. So was the use of force reasonable under the circumstances of that stop? That's truly the issue. Now, you and I found interesting that the judge allowed in evidence of a prior arrest of Floyd, wherein Floyd allegedly ingested drugs to hide from police, to hide the drugs from the police. He ingested those drugs, something you saw, in fact, during your time in court more than once. That was allowed into evidence, despite the fact that during the stop, the officers did not know of that prior offense or the prior behavior. So
that was a little risky on the judge for appellate reasons. So that could be interesting. I don't have a very good read on where the jury is or how they feel. I know that we've heard evidence, obviously, from both sides, and it's going to be interesting. I just pray that no matter what happens, there is not a burning of a city. It's really important to be able to have our criminal justice system act. It's really still the best system in the world, even though it's flawed. And I really hope and pray that there's no burning of a city.
Would you guess that the ultimate verdict would be either third-degree murder or second-degree manslaughter?
I'm not willing to say all of that yet because I don't know the facts, and I hate it when the media, the mainstream media, cable media, they do a lot of conjecture on that. And from being in a courtroom, and certainly I do from spending many years in a courtroom, that it really comes down to the facts that those people hear. And most of every jury I was ever in front of, probably did 25 to 30 myself over the years, they took it very seriously. And they really took their responsibility seriously. I know they're doing that in these high-profile cases for sure. And
how many times were you shocked by the result in your case of the 25 or 30 times? How many times did they come back with a verdict that just shocked you?
Oh, I would say
truly surprised.
None.
None?
None were truly surprising one way or the other.
Is that when you were a public defender and they were all guilty?
No, that's not true. That's not true at all. None were very shocking. I mean, if you're taking something to trial, you usually had a really good issue to put out.
Okay.
If not, it's settled.
But you've seen compromised verdicts, certainly.
Oh, certainly. Yeah. There's compromised verdicts. I just am very cautious to ever do that, especially having not heard all of the evidence, not followed it daily. I think it's really important for us to recognize that this system really works, and it's really the best in the world. And there's a lot to it that we should not that we should be proud of.
So the one thing we all agree on, we pray for, at least most of us in this country, is that regardless of the verdict in this case or any case, rioting, looting,
violence is not the way to go. It's not the way to change things. It's never the answer.
Never the answer. And of course, the ultimate irony there is the people who tend to get hit hard, the areas that get hit hard, are typically the place where poor people live. So they end up paying an extraordinary price.
Why would you burn where you live? I don't understand that. Never have understood that. It just doesn't make any sense.
You don't understand that because
And let me tell you, these cities don't come back. Look at Baltimore from Freddie Gray, which has now been quite some time. And Baltimore, for lots of systemic reasons, is not coming back in a major way, that's for sure. But that the burning of those cities, the vandalism, those types of property crimes really do matter, because you don't have people that are willing to come in and stay and rebuild and do businesses and to really become part of that community. And you've got to realize that if we're really in it all together, then we're really in it all together.
And you have seen many of these Soros-sponsored prosecutors back away from prosecuting property crimes. And now drug possession cases. And it's basic lawlessness. And let me tell you something. Those prosecutors took an oath to obey the law. If there was any area where people should be impeached, it should be that, because they're not obeying their oath that they took for the very office that they got elected. And I want to move on to our last subject here. But before we leave, recall our buddy Rudy Giuliani. What did he do in his first campaign? What did he promise in his early days in office? What did he accomplish his first couple of years that was so amazing to law enforcement, to regular old people in New York who are growing tired of the property crime, the minor offenses,
The prostitution on Times Square.
Right. The property crimes, the misdemeanors. He had the police get tough and clean the place up.
And let me say,
And New York responded in a big way.
I was never a big proponent of prosecuting quote unquote victimless crimes. Prostitution is not a victimless crime when they're forcing young women into sex trade. And that business is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so,
Well, speaking of sex,
yes,
Andrew Cuomo, we now are watching.
Andrew Cuomo, where's that story?
Well,
it sort of disappeared.
It's interesting because
Where is that story?
let's just go back to the beginning.
How about the dead people in the nursing homes? What about that?
Hold on a second there. Hold on. Jeez, let her loose a little bit, and there she goes. So not so long ago, this was the Democratic rock star in the country, no doubt about
He
it.
got an Emmy.
Unlimited future.
An Emmy for his press conferences.
Enjoyed
How low can we
incredible
get?
press. Published a book concerning his leadership during the pandemic. Could have been anything. A lot of people want him to run for president. A lot of people still want him to run for president, maybe less today. But the fawning press was around for a long time, but not so much today. The nursing home decision, obviously, has been big time. Members of his staff coming out and saying, yes, we made that conscious decision. We didn't want this, or we were fearful of the actual numbers being published. Bad press, bad storyline, bad consequences. And then, of course, now 8 female members of former staff, present staff, whomever, women he's met, have come forward with allegations of inappropriate contact in some cases, but inappropriate moves by the governor. Now, in April, by the way, last April, he was 77 up, 21 down. Those numbers are astounding. 77 approved, 21 disapprove. Today, 40 approve, 52 disapprove in New York. Most of that decline, by the way, comes from Democrats. Republicans didn't like him to begin with.
Right.
Republicans in New York,
They're not
it's a
polled.
pretty small sample. So these numbers are a function of Democrats saying, no, we liked him then, we don't like him now. 50-50 on whether Democrats would support his reelection for another term as governor. Half say he should fill out his term, half say he should not. But the story, and this is your point, and I'll let you go now, the story has been front page all along with COVID and China and the election and the Biden administration. And now suddenly the last couple weeks, I should say, since woman number 8 came forward, it's been page B3. Mrs. Ehrlich, why?
Well, it's just what Democrats do. They decide that they're not going to do a story, or they decide they are going to do a story. And, it's just part of this continued mainstream media deciding to support the Biden Cuomo, the Democratic Party. And that's what they're going to do. They're just not going to report on certain stories. But
these are the great friends of feminism. These are
that hypocrisy is so open
that?
and obvious now. They can't even really hide behind that anymore. I mean, it's just it's really shameful, and it's all part of Republicans always say that they're just not going to report those stories, and it is part of their narrative. And the press is dead. Real journalism is dead. And we continue to say that, but it's true. I mean, it's all about Big Brother.
So let me ask you this
It's Big
question.
Brother. They decide what stories are going to go forward and what not. Now, I will say that certainly the border got so big and so terrible that they had to do something. But that's also because other cable news networks were pushing the envelope, taking cameras down. The Congress was going down to that border with cameras, and so they had to acknowledge what was being said and done by other people that are really reporting the facts.
Well, let me ask you this question: as a woman, as a very high-profile woman who's given this a lot of thought, there's really 2 categories of accusation here. One is with regard to the nursing homes, and that's bad. A cover up, it's always what the old
The
line,
cover
right?
up
The
of
cover up's
deaths,
always worse.
real deaths. People lost their family members.
Right. Then the original decision. The cover up's always bad. The great lesson from Watergate. That, in the minds of many, is an impeachable offense. Now, with regard to the 8 women, the circumstances are all different. Some are more serious than others. Do you rate? So, I guess your thoughts on if it's an inappropriate gesture taken wrong, that's not an impeachable offense, correct? In your view?
Look, I think you have to look at all of it
Right,
in
you have to look at
total,
each
however.
circumstance,
Well, you have to
correct.
look at each circumstance, but also the pattern of behavior. And
Aha,
there is a
okay.
pattern of behavior, and I think when you're looking at a pattern of behavior like this, you have to look at all of it in total. Where are the feminists? You're right. But they're always only for...
Yeah, I think
They're for Democratic women. I don't know where they are in this case.
Well, I think it's a matter of fairness. You have to look at the facts and circumstance of each one. But your point is really taken. I think
it's a pattern of behavior.
right, because if it's 1 or 2 offs and it's someone that misinterpreted, that happens sometimes. You cut somebody a break. It's certainly not impeachable. But as you get more serious, as you get more aggressive, and those facts come out, then you get closer to that line, correct?
Yeah, remember the comedian from the Senate who resigned?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't think he should have resigned. I think it was a joke. It was, might have been stupid or inappropriate but it was a joke. And he wound up resigning over that. And I didn't think he should. I don't agree with that guy on anything. But in this instance, the volume, the pattern of behavior, the arrogance,
Arrogance is not an impeachable offense.
It's not, but it is
a pattern.
A pattern of behavior that is so inappropriate that it lends itself to the fact that he should resign.
And as lawyers, we would want to see each one of the factual patterns in those situations develop so people can make their decisions.
It's just so alarming that the women aren't supporting the women that have come forward. I mean, how alarming is that? Picking and choosing.
On that note, on that cheery note, we love our show here. We love sharing our views with you. You can tell sometimes we're scripted, sometimes we're unscripted, but we like to, as we used to do with our radio show, we're having a great time with the podcast here, just give you our unvarnished thoughts on the issues of the day. We welcome your input. We welcome your opinions as well, and we really thank you for listening.
Thanks for joining Bottom Line with Bob and Kendel Ehrlich.
Godspeed.